Our father has been kidnapped, all the villagers have been abducted, and zombies walk the earth. That either means we shouldn't have read aloud from that book bound in human flesh, or we're playing Moon Crystal on this episode of Doki Doki Game Club. Hello and welcome to Doki Doki Game Club, a retro video game podcast. I am your host, Brandon Fincher, and I am joined today by a collection of crystal-coveting cliffhangers. Frank Martin.
Hello.
Brian Grogan.
Hey there.
And Mr. Joseph Luster.
Hey there, hey there.
On Doki Doki Game Club, we each take a turn choosing a particular title from video game history, and we announce the selection online so everyone can play along at home. From there, we have 2 weeks to spend with a title, at which point we reconvene for a deep dive into the nuts and bolts of the game. Today's pick was made by Brian, and the title is Moon Crystal for the Nintendo Family Computer. Moon Crystal was released on August 28, 1992, exclusively for the Nintendo Famicom. It was both developed and published by Hecht, aka Hector Playing Interface, a company whose limited body of work included such unusual titles as Thoroughbred Breeder 2 Plus and the U.S. presidential campaign simulator America Daitorio Senkyo. Moon Crystal was slated for a North American release but was ultimately canceled, which means it was never officially released outside of Japan. So, guys, how you doing?
Great.
Good.
Great.
All right.
I think while we're on the topic of history, I'd like to kind of touch base with each of you and see what sort of history you have with Moon Crystal.
If at all.
If at all, yeah. Was the first time that you heard of this game when Brian proposed we play it?
Yeah, for me, I had never heard of it by name, and I'm a huge Nintendo buff. Like, I make Nintendo music, and I've never heard of it, and that kind of blew my mind because it's not a bad game. Like, it's a good game, and I don't understand why I never heard of it, but yeah.
I kind of felt the same way, yeah, because like I had never, I fancy myself. I thought I was familiar with all the cool platformers on Nintendo and Famicom, but this one kind of took me by surprise. So yeah, I'd never heard of it until Brian suggested it.
Yeah, I have to admit the same. I'd never heard of it before you mentioned it, Brian. How is it that you came aware of this little hidden gem?
Well, really, my first brush with it was I was covered by Sean Faze of Temp Sound Solutions. I think we're going to get into that a little later. But that was, I saw the names like, oh, Moon Crystal. Okay, wonder what that is. It wasn't until I didn't see it played until my friend Robbie, or mutual friend Robbie, was playing it, and in fact I saw him first playing the pirate ship level, and I was like, oh, this looks like Peter Pan game? Like, what do we have here?
Yeah, it looks kind of like Hook.
Yeah, right, yeah, totally. But then him and he's not the first person to suggest to me that. You should really check this out. And it's been on my to-play list for a while, and with the advent of Doki Doki Game Club, I figured this is a perfect time to give it a shot.
So you had never played it before?
No, I had not picked it up once.
So it was all 100% fresh for all of us then.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, well, now that we've covered the history of Moon Crystal, I'd say it's time for the Back of the Box.
The very beautiful village of Cirrus. The Slaters are a husband and wife team conducting research into ores and minerals. Their only son Ricky lives out his days peacefully among the villagers. However, one night, someone appeared in the village, and the people of the village were all taken away somewhere. It was by the hand of Count Crimson's minions. Their aim in this country was nothing but the barely discovered Moon Crystal. A dreadful secret is said to be concealed within the mysterious shining gem. Only one person escaped this disaster, Ricky. And now, in order to rescue the villagers, he sets out on a journey.
Special thanks to Rachel Marino for translating the text from the back of the box for Moon Crystal. Despite this game's cult status, we weren't able to find a complete English translation of the text, so thank you, Rachel, for taking the time to help us out with that.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
All right, Brian. So since this was your pick, I think it's time for you to propose to us the elevator pitch. Please explain to the listeners who may have never heard of this one before what kind of game it is exactly.
Okay, I got this great idea for a game for you. It's an action platformer with a unique gameplay inspired by the original Prince of Persia game, where a young boy takes on a Victorian-era mad scientist bent on altering life as we know it. If you want more of our tagline, it's easy to play, difficult to master.
Oh,
True.
That's a good one. And very accurate. Okay, so I think I'd like to start, as we're wont to do, by talking about the visual presentation of Moon Crystal. When you guys fired this game up, what struck you about the visuals in particular?
The animation, definitely. That's like that's the star of the game. And when I first
maybe describe a little bit of that, Joseph,
yeah,
if you
it's
wouldn't mind.
well. Brian had mentioned Prince of Persia, and it's no accident because the inspiration is clear, and in just the animation of Ricky. Ricky has way more frames than usual for running. You usually expect maybe one or two, for ducking, running, and all that stuff, and turning. But everything that he does is pretty meticulously animated, and for better or worse, gameplay wise. But visually speaking, it looks amazing.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And that whole hanging off of ledges is very, very Prince of Persia as well.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's one of the
totally.
key mechanics for sure.
And satisfying too, and I think we'll dig in a little more when we get to
The
talking
mechanics,
about the details of the mechanics. But it looks cool, and it's the aspect of hanging off of a ledge, near death is pretty exciting.
To me, I felt that it looked a lot like a PC-98, like anime style cutscenes that are kind of really well made. Not so much Ricky's hair; it was kind of flat, but
That was weird.
But
Ricky, in comparison to the rest of the cast that you'll see through those cutscenes, Ricky he looks a little weird.
Yeah,
I mean, like
off.
the rest. He is the most anime of the bunch.
He's your anime
and then-
boy.
Yeah,
Super
and then the
anime
rest of
boy.
them all look a little more grounded in reality.
yeah, there's like a girl with like curly hair and it's like really nice details. She's got big blue eyes and it looks really cool. But then Ricky's just like, it looks like somebody took a fill in paint and just like filled his hair with green.
I feel like Ricky's right in the midst of a lot of European design too.
Yeah.
Okay,
character wise, and it kind of, I mean that was obviously kind of part of the era too. Like it reminds me a lot of 80s manga, just the character designs besides Ricky really. I mean, Ricky looks like the protagonist of a children's manga and the other ones look kind of more like an adult or
Sure.
like older audience manga.
No, that's a good point. Yeah. What do you guys think in particular the color palette? Because Ricky, for people that have never laid eyes on this game before, is mostly a strange shade of like tennis ball yellow. His hair and pants, and he's sort of outlined in a weird kind of a red-brown color. At least that's how it looked when I played it.
Yeah, it's like a brown tunic with like green hair, green pants, green shoes, but like a kind of like a yellowish green, like you said, like a tennis ball.
Yeah, and they also went with the Konami outlined. Like he has a very definite outline. Pixel around him. Whereas,
well, much like Nemo, I think that a lot of this design was just to make him stand out amongst a variety of stages.
Oh, for sure,
For sure.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of the
there's some
backgrounds-
stages.
A lot of the backgrounds are
Yeah.
kind of like brown and gold and like stuff like that. So he really pops out, which is great. It's
Yeah, and I mean even later too. Like some of the more difficult parts of the game are set against a black backdrop. With things happening in the background. So yeah, it would have been tough to see him otherwise. What do you guys? I mean, we briefly mentioned the cutscenes, but I think that's a pretty important part to this game in that you're getting a lot more story than you would, in a game lacking those sorts of things.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about those in too much detail just yet, but what did you guys think of the general art style found in those cutscenes?
I liked it. I didn't like it as much as like a Ninja Gaiden, but I did find it interesting and different for the era for sure.
I was very pleased that you could skip or speed the text up without skipping the pages.
Yeah, that was
No, I mean that you laugh and that's funny, but I mean that is definitely like a massive feature. I think
it makes a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean you can read it and then or skip it completely, or but you can't. I thought there's so many games where if you mash the button you miss the scene, and or you read it at a snail's pace.
Yeah. There's so many where you actually have the text sound effect like you have to wait for every word or every letter to go by even. So this was kind of a breath of fresh air in that regard.
But speaking of sound effect, I think it gave like a constant meh when you were like going through it, because I think like the beep beeps would like meld into one another.
Oh, sure.
And it just go like,
that's true.
It was kind of this weird sound.
Speaking of the sound design, typically we would talk about music a little bit later in the episode, but I think I'd like to kind of bump it up to the other side of the coin for the visual and auditory presentation for this. So, what did you guys think of the soundtrack in general? Anyone have any particular thoughts on it?
Coming as a music composer for the NES, it's very well made, but it's not very varied. It's okay. A lot of songs have like a droney feel to it. Like I know, like I think it was
and
third
very
stage.
short loops.
Short loops, and just like if you know anything about the NES, is like the tri-channel, which is like triangle, and it's like one of the songs is like bum 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 on the triangle, and it's just kind of like, okay, yeah, I get it. But then there's like the boss theme that is like these arps and like arpeggios, and it's really cool. But then there's other songs that are kind of like...
I think some of the tracks really stand out, and some of them are bottom of the barrel. Like the Stage 2 song is so bad, and it's almost like kind of just a song that they... Like almost a leftover song. They're like, we got to stick this somewhere. Yeah. Whereas Stage 3 is my favorite song, and I think it's like... So we'll get it into the stage later, but it's so fitting with what the stage is doing.
Yeah, and it has
so
a nice
exciting
atmosphere, but I felt like musically, like compared to like the boss battle or the first stage, it was like kind of lacking on like technique. I guess.
Frank, you mentioned the droning aspect of it. Does anyone have any familiarity with Aide? Did you guys play that as kids?
Yeah.
Vaguely.
Boys, something about this game, both the gameplay experience itself and the music in particular, just something made me think of Aide while I was playing it. Did anyone else pick up on that at all?
I didn't think about it, but now that you mention it, it kind of makes sense.
Even that theme to Aide with that sort of like, like it's pretty droning, those first couple of notes.
Yeah.
And Brian, you mentioned when your kind of your very, very first exposure to this would have been the song, the medley that Sean Faze through Temp Sound Solutions did of this. And I kind of wanted to take a moment here to fit in a bit of that so the listeners at home can check it out. Yeah, so that was the medley of Moon Crystal that Sean Faze and through Temp Sound Solutions had made. I think it's a great track, and it's got some of the highlights from the game in there. We had talked about the music briefly of the game, and I have to admit, when I first played through this, I've played through it twice now, but through my first playthrough, I found the music to be a little bit grating and kind of like blended into the background. Nothing really jumped out at me, and I think I was just focused on mastering the mechanics of the game, and like I don't know, it just didn't register with me. But I have to say, on my second playthrough, I found myself humming the music, and it like lingering with me a little bit later. So, I just kind of wanted to point that out because I feel like I would not have had the same connection with the music had I only just played through it one time and been done with it. So that's kind of a lesson to people playing video games, especially these old games. You may have something else to take away from a repeat visit. So I just thought that was something.
Well, like you said, right? Like if your first playthrough, you're very focused on mastering the controls and mastering the game and trying not to die, that you don't really pay attention to the music. But then once you got that figured out, you can take the time to enjoy it, I guess.
Okay, so moving on to the mechanics and controls of the game, which is really the thing I feel that sets this game apart from other platformers.
Yeah.
Of its peers. Brian, you mentioned the Prince of Persia aspect of it. Does someone care to elaborate on that a bit more? We talked about the elaborate animations, but what's to someone that hasn't played this, maybe give us a little walkthrough of the sorts of perils that young Ricky comes across and how the mechanics play into navigating those.
Well, to me, that I've noticed, and it's a very fluid mix of Prince of Persia and Ninja Gaiden, I think, because you get these power-ups. Well, there's 2 power-ups, and then you're not as slow as Prince of Persia. There's no big delay on the startup of the run and stuff like that. So it's a little bit more fluid and fast, but you're slow on turning and you're slow on jumping to a degree. So it kind of has those both worlds kind of.
Boy, I don't want to slow you down, but that the speed at which Ricky changes directions, man, so incredibly frustrating at times. Sometimes it's fine, and we'll talk maybe in a little more detail about that during a particular boss stage. But certain enemies that you come across, bosses in particular, have require a certain type of finesse. If you're going to attempt to beat them that way, and I just want to mention that I found the best means for combating the delay in his turning around is just changing direction midair.
Yeah.
Doesn't
or
always
never turn
work.
around.
Yeah. It doesn't always work. Because sometimes you'll change direction too soon, and then you'll end up landing right on top of the boss.
Yeah.
But if you can get your timing just right, you can do some acrobatics,
Sure.
With a quick attack and then a jump back to the next.
And that's
side,
like the advanced version of this game. That aspect of it, and we'll get into this more with bosses, but that aspect reminded me most of Zelda 2, which is kind of why I was like, oh, now I see why Brian picked this. Because
there's that.
Yeah, it just depends on that getting down that jump and slash, which is really finicky.
Yeah.
Especially for a beginner, I think is the really tough kind of advanced part of this game.
But what I thought was really good on the part of the developers is that the stages are not made in a way that they're not conscious about like the way Ricky moves. So, like if we're gonna talk about like maybe days, like the level design was not made this for Santa Claus, like but these levels are made for Ricky. So like there's no like
for sure.
There's no like really small platforms that you need to hit or something. But if you do, there's something on below it that you can grab to the ledge or whatever. So I don't know. I feel like it was very, very well designed, at least level wise.
Absolutely. I will say in response to that, though, that this game isn't completely without its frustrations in regards to the level design.
Pirate ship.
The platform, the platforms that you'll often jump onto, or clear a gulf and then land onto one, is fine. But I can definitely think of a couple of aspects, especially in the first stage when you're attempting to get used to the mechanics where. There's such a small pixel window for where Ricky can reach up. I mean, it's realistic in that regard, in that you need to put him underneath the very edge of the ledge, or he's not going to grab it. And if you go too far forward, and you're trying to jump, then he's just going to pass right through the platform that you're trying to climb. So. It's just one of those things, you'll have to
like if you
learn to accept it.
If you come from like a Metroid Fusion where it's like really, really nice and easy to grab ledges, to a game like this is definitely different.
Absolutely. You mentioned the Ninja Gaiden comparison, and I have a list here of the power-ups in the game, and I just kind of felt like they were worth listing off actually one at a time, just because they add a little bit of a feature to the game, which it makes it more than just a traditional platformer, because you're looking for these things, and it's a small satisfaction that when you come across a treasure chest. So. You've got these power-ups. You can get a 1-up, and that's pretty much standard in any game.
It's like a Ricky coin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. You get a clear heart that increases Ricky's life meter by a maximum of 1. And you can get a big heart, which will fill those up. But I thought it was kind of cool in that when you collect those clear hearts, it's giving you something to aspire to, I guess, for lack of a better term.
It doesn't give you full health.
No, yeah, it becomes a little game.
Yeah, it's like stay alive and you'll fill this up.
Yeah.
Kind of in the same way that didn't Days Before Christmas have a similar thing where like you would have like the capacity for further health?
It was Little Nemo.
Boy, am I blending those together?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, I suppose I am. Well, yeah. Either way, it's a thing that you can do and it's a game in itself, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because you're doing this and you have a visible goal in front of you. And you're attempting to get more health in there.
But I guess in Days you were thinking about the if you finish a level,
extra Santa hat.
Yeah, you can get an extra one. Like you can get a total of 5 or something, but you can get 4.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Something.
Like going beyond the default.
But also in Nemo, the gorilla, like let's say you grab the gorilla, you get like 3 extra hearts or whatever, and then they're blank.
That's true. Yeah, I think they're just starting to blur together.
Different life mechanics.
But moving right along, so you start off with a dagger as Ricky as his sole means of attack. And
can we talk about that real quick? The length that attack is.
Oh yeah. Also, we should point out that the comparison there also with Zelda 2.
Yeah.
With this incredibly short attack range.
Sure.
But fortunately, with Moon Crystal, you can easily find an upgrade, and they're calling it a dagger, at least in the source that I came across. But it's essentially a sword, like the difference between wielding a sword and wielding a dagger.
Yeah.
But yeah, is there something else you wanted to add to it, Joseph?
No, I was just thinking about how just puny his default range is. It's more of the Peter Pan connection there.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, you go from Peter Pan's dagger to Captain Hook's sword.
Yeah, and it's almost like nice. I wish it would get bigger, even bigger, like because some of the close encounters and the encounters are very, very close in this game.
Yeah.
So and then they're not really geared. I don't think they're completely designed for that. At least not designed well for that. So it could stand to have a little bit more long range action.
I hate to keep going back to the Zelda 2 well with this, but I felt that it wasn't nearly as frustrating as that. So even though you have this short range of attack, it's just kind of like Ricky's punch. Sure. And most enemies go down with a single hit.
Everything but one enemy.
Yeah,
which is great.
It's satisfying, and it keeps the speed of the game going. In a way that it wouldn't otherwise. And there are parts of the game that are slowed down where the game wants you to attempt to navigate vertically. And so I feel like the trade-off of quick combat while you're going horizontally is just kind of a nice give and take.
Yeah, and I think that's it's a good choice, because if you would linger on kind of like a Prince of Persia-ish, like slow and very like you have to think about everything you do. This is a lot more fast paced that way. That's why it kind of reminds me of a Ninja Gaiden, where you can kind of just run and like, oh, okay, you
slash through things.
And you don't need to. You won't mess up as bad.
So in addition to the weapon upgrade, you also get a diamond occasionally, and a diamond sort of acts as an invincibility timer for Ricky, which is useful, I suppose, in certain situations. It can certainly make it to where you can just kind of blaze through the area that you're attempting to get through. You've also got a small heart, which is your standard fare that'll increase your health by 1. And last but not least is the winged boots. Which gives Ricky a double jump. And does anyone have any thoughts or feelings about the jumping mechanics with the winged boots?
It was a little weird. I didn't at first. You can only do that double jump as long as you're still rising. So if you start falling, you don't get to do that double jump. And I think I fell into a pit once because I expected to be able to just
I learned that the hard way.
Fall and then jump.
I can think of one section in particular that we can talk about later. But
I wish, a complaint that I have, I wish there was a visual indicator of whether you had the wing boots or not.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that would have been a good idea.
That would have been great because, I'll make a jump expecting to be able to double jump and nope, I'm going to the pit. So I don't know if
there's even some spaces in that menu at the bottom that would just fit 2 icons that you have the sword.
That would have worked. Yeah. I think it would have been cooler if you could have, had some high tops, but sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think altering the appearance of the sprite, it might be a little too much to ask for, but especially from this company.
If they'd brought this to America, they definitely would have added some cool high tops.
Yeah. Okay. So with that said, I think it's now time to move along to talk of the level design. Moon Crystal gets a pre-start cutscene that begins with a line of ominous text that reads, "You mustn't go out during a full moon. That's when the dead walk the woods. If they catch you, they'll drag you into their graves." We cut to a moonlit scene at a cemetery showing corpses rising out of the ground. This is followed by a shot of a frightened woman backed against a wall as the shadows of the undead close in around her. From there, we jump to a scene set on a grassy field, where we meet Ricky, the game's protagonist, and Merle, presumably his sister. The two have a brief conversation about the legend of the dead rising during the full moon. We then move forward to a scene sometime later at the home of Ricky and his family, where shadowy assailants are attacking. In a panic, Ricky's father, Dr. Slater, reveals that they're after an item called the moon crystal. This is followed by the man lashing out at the invaders, which allows Ricky time to escape. After this, we're given a narration explaining that everyone in the village was abducted but Ricky, followed by the moon crystal title screen. Once the game begins, another cutscene plays where Dr. Slater reveals the titular moon crystal to his son and explains its unusual properties. It seems the crystal, in connection to the moon itself, not only has powers over the tide and gravity, but it also possesses mystical qualities. Apparently there are sacred powers in the moon, and this moon crystal is some sort of conduit to those powers. This is followed by Ricky putting together that everyone in the village must have been abducted because of the strange stone, and the game begins. Okay, so stage one is the forest.
As all good games begin.
Exactly, right? Like that's a fine a tradition steeped in the classics there.
Yep.
And it's presumably right outside of Ricky's village, and he is traversing waterfalls and wooded areas and coming across your first batch of enemies. And Brian, you coined the term and sort of pointed out to me that you felt that the first enemy you come across looks like a moon cultist. You called it.
Yeah, totally. Like they're in these hoods, robes.
Yeah.
This hooded. And they have this
I really love
dagger.
I love that. I love the description of that being a moon cultist, and as simple as it is to, I guess, define something with a title, it makes the game so much more interesting to me to think that my mind immediately just runs off and the idea of these people that worked for the Count wholly adhering to this idea that this moon crystal has some sort of power and that they worship the moon. It just makes them so much more sinister.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
I think it wasn't until we just talked about the moon cultist, or you just mentioned it, that kind of moon crystal reminds me a little bit of a Miyazaki movie in some ways, because I can imagine these cloddish enemies with robes that the main protagonist beats up, like in Castle in the Sky or something.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think the aesthetic. We didn't really talk about this too much during the visual aspect of it, but the aesthetic of the cutscenes, while not Studio Ghibli and whole cloth, there's just something about the combination to me of the settings throughout the game and the sort of weird mix of technology that you see alongside things like castles and,
exactly.
And old-timey wooden ships and that sort of thing that really kind of lends itself to that as well, which is definitely a cool thing worth pointing out. So I don't know. Does anyone have any thoughts about what were your experiences on this first stage?
This was
sorry. As soon as you saw the giant spider, I'm like, whoa, that is way scarier than that should be way scarier than it is. Like you just kind of hit it and it just dies.
Yeah.
Like a spider
Right.
that looks like it's 150 pounds.
Yeah, it's
Sure.
Terrifying. But then you just hit it and it explodes.
The size of a massive Saint Bernard.
Yeah, exactly.
But even those moon cultists that we call them seemed very imposing. I thought they would take multiple hits and then you just go in and you go poke and then they die. They explode.
Agreed. Yeah, the visuals in this game definitely set a more imposing appearance. But do you feel at all cheated by the fact that the enemies didn't require more attacks?
No. Because
I feel relieved.
It's very satisfying.
For sure.
Yeah, they're satisfying in to bring up Ninja Gaiden again in the similar way where you kind of get to run and keep your pace going and just slash through enemies. Sure. And once you learn to run and jump slash your way through them, it kind of changes the game up.
Yeah.
And this was like, we mentioned that none of us had played this before, and this stage obviously was my first introduction to it, and I just the first time I popped in, I played it real quick. I played the first stage, and I was just like, wow, this is amazing, and it really is the perfect introduction to the game.
And then it goes to shit.
For sure. No, that's not fair. We'll get to that more later. But I wanted to agree with you on that the way that the game holds your hand, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's not really
fair.
No,
introduces.
The way that the game
it prepares you. Yeah,
it's holding your hand. It's certainly preparing you, and it's preparing you by limiting the amount of things that you have to worry about. Because stage 1 compared to the later stages, for sure, is a much briefer experience, and but it gives you a little smorgasbord of the games. You get the mechanics, you get the enemy combat, you get the verticality of it, where you're climbing trees to bypass the tarantulas. That was a moment that definitely stuck out in my mind. Where you're climbing up through tree limbs, that kind of made me wish the tarantulas were a little more imposing, not just visually, but like, I can just go down there and kill this thing, and I really have no reason to go up. Short of exploring for missing hidden items or power ups, that sort of thing. So the idea of being able to bypass an enemy, you kind of need some incentive, I feel, to do so. Otherwise, you can kind of just, unless you just want to play around within the game. Does anyone else?
Well, it also does a really good job. I kind of know what you mean, and I sort of agree with you, and I didn't think about it at the time, but I see, because there's so much maneuverability in different areas that it would have been nice to have any reason to get out of the way of something.
Sure.
The only thing I would say that you might want to get out of the way of, at least when you first start, is I kind of found the archers annoying at first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they are, and I know that. Yeah, Brandy, you said you had wanted to note that they had really stupid AI, but
for sure.
I think it's actually pretty brilliant the way that it was designed, because obviously you have to duck over if the arrows are coming at you, and then you basically it trains you for a later boss fight, and we can talk about that when it happens. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I guess I'd never really thought of those archer characters as being a bit of a foreshadowing to how you would fight a boss later. And I won't dispute that fact, but I'm not entirely sure I agree with you. I can see why you would make that claim, but so to the listeners that haven't played this game yet, you have these pink-clad archer characters, presumably female, who will come into the scene and will take shots at you, and then if you get close enough to them, they'll just proceed to jump back and forth over you for no reason, and never ever attack you after that. So if you stay still or edge your way over as when they're mid-air and they can't change direction, you can just get close enough to where when they do fall, you can deliver the death blow, and that's the end of it. And it's so different because you don't have to encounter any other enemy in the game, normal enemy, in that same regard. And it stuck out to me so much, and I thought it was kind of silly.
Yeah.
Well,
for sure, but
correct me if I'm wrong. You can knock their arrows out of the air, right?
That's a good question.
I'm pretty sure you can knock all the projectiles out of the air.
Which is a really cool thing when you discover that. Yeah. I guess that teaches you how to do it, and it's not it's pretty rare in these games that you can slash back at the projectiles and stop them, and it kind of brings another level of skill to the combat.
And okay, so you guys sound well aware of this, and I noticed in a couple instances, especially with some of the enemies later on, there's a hovering machine that we'll talk about that sort of tosses rocks out at you. And I noticed that a couple of times that I batted away those projectiles, but I didn't realize that you could really do that with every projectile in the game. So honestly, now hearing that makes me want to go back and play through it another time to see what sort of experience it would be like if I could get good at just batting away the projectiles, because I could see that being a whole nother experience.
Yeah, I never really did that with the arrows, but yeah, now I do want it. I've beaten this game every day for the last 4 days, and now I want to go back and play it again.
That's so awesome.
So you're set in this woodland setting. We've talked about that. You've got these moon cultists. There are bats, of course. You can't have a spooky outdoor setting in a game without having bats. The aforementioned tarantulas and archers. Eventually, if you make your way through the stage, you're going to end up at the first boss of the game. And you're not really given any plot regarding these enemies, which is fine, but it is what it is. And it's a little... Compared to the way that the game delivers the story otherwise, it's kind of strange that there's no justification for having this boss fight. But nevertheless, this first fight is a guy we're going to call the Axeman. And he is essentially a big, brutish, muscular, shirtless character with an axe and long, dark hair. Nice and easy, I would say, if everyone would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it took me more than one life to
deceivingly so
figure out his pattern. Yeah. He maybe someone that paid a little more attention, maybe Brian, since you've played through it 4 times now. I noticed that when I would go in and attack him and attempt to get a hit in on him, I would sometimes hear the metallic clank of what I assumed was Ricky's dagger or sword bouncing off of the Axeman's axe. Is that?
Oh wait, did you fight him head on?
I've beaten it twice now, and I fought him head on the first time, and then the second time I would jump behind him and get in my hits that way.
Yeah, no. If you attack him with his axe in front of him, he's totally not. Your hits aren't going to get through. You have to wait until either his axe is on the ground after he's done a swipe at you, and then you can attack like kind of his higher upper head area. Or you have to hit him in the butt.
Gotcha. And that's pretty cool. I mean, it sounds like a little thing, but for this enemy to have essentially a guard, a guard set up that makes him impervious to damage, or you have this back route that you can take to try to kill him. It's a simple thing, and the encounter is over before it even begins. But I don't know. I just thought that was a nice detail.
Yeah, I think it's pretty well designed as a first boss because most of the bosses are fought in that same second way of getting behind them and getting as many slashes in before they turn around. And this guy turns around really slowly. He can get maybe 3, even 4 hits in.
And then that's keeping with the holding of the hand. It really gives you time to, because you're at that point you're still getting used to the mechanics of the game and the timing of the jumps and that sort of thing. So. I like that quite a bit.
Well, and also this is very much like the Ninja Gaiden again, because he reminded me of the same animations of that first boss. Where it's the chop.
Oh yeah,
chop.
Yeah.
All right. So, does anyone have any thoughts about the forest that maybe we haven't covered just yet?
You mentioned that there's like no rhyme or reason to the boss, but he is a lumberjack in a forest, so...
Sure. I was thinking more in the grander scheme of things. The
half-naked lumberjack.
I'm so used to playing Dark Souls games where like everything is so like tied into each other that right. I was trying to figure out how the Count employed this guy.
No, it's just a lumberjack in your way. You're just murdering an innocent man.
No, you're in his way.
Yeah.
He's just there. He's trying to earn a living, and Ricky rolls up with his dagger and
starts attacking him, and he's just defending himself. That's it.
Horrible. All right, so now that we're playing Murder Simulator 2000.
Well, I did want to bring up one thing, again, with the hand-holy thing, the way this game is designed. You do see the quote-unquote secret area visible from just your normal gameplay. So as you're climbing the one mountain right before the waterfall, you see there's a chest, and then at that one area you'd be like, I wouldn't normally fall down where this waterfall area is, but I've been shown where this chest is. And that's where there's an extra life. There's a bunch of different secret areas in the game. I don't know how many you guys found. I'd be interested. Maybe you found some that I didn't, but we can talk about it.
I definitely found that one, and I'm glad that you remembered to bring it up because I did think that was pretty cool. And I keep using that term in a lot of these games of verticality. But when you have a game that is a platformer and so many of them essentially just have you going left or right, it's really cool to traverse a vertical plane, especially in the case of something like this where you're trying to find secrets. I thought that was really cool.
After Ricky passes through the forest, he meets a mysterious young woman named Rosina, who reveals it was Count Crimson who was responsible for the abductions, and further clarifies that it was due to Ricky's father's research into the moon crystal. She points out that the Count's castle is beyond the town that lies before them, and that the abducted villagers should be there. She then pleads with Ricky to stop the Count, and we move on to the next stage.
Okay, so beyond the forest and our introduction to Rosina, we come to the bridge leading to the city, which, for the sake of this stage, it's just referred to as Waylaid Street. So one has to assume, I guess, that this is a street within the city. Yeah. Urban setting, nice transition from the wooded area into a more urban area. Something about so listeners haven't played it. The first thing you start in on stage 2 is you're literally on a bridge. There's not a whole lot going on, but it establishes a certain architecture or a certain thoughtfulness, at least to me it did, of the layout of this world, and that there's a village where Ricky lives, then there's a forest, then there must be a body of water separating the forest area from this city proper. Yeah. And so for them to start you in that area, I don't know, it's just kind of cool. Yeah. I like that.
I like the I don't know if you guys noticed, but in the background, there's parallaxing effects of the
parallax is awesome in that stage.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So once you get inside the city proper, so it basically takes you from a bridge screen into a screen where you're surrounded by buildings and more moon cultists. There's archers in this as well. This stage is the first time that you come across those the rock throwing machines that I mentioned earlier. I'm not sure if they're rocks or not.
I think it's just supposed to be bullets.
Yeah,
I mean, it just seems like a drone.
Yeah,
it kind of pops up from the ground and spits out 3, I think, bullets at once.
Right.
And they follow you. I mean, wherever you are, it'll shoot the spread your way.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely to a certain degree. I mean, you can obviously get out of their range or whatever. Another kind of satisfying, if not poorly designed, detail is the fact that if you get right beneath these projectile drones or whatever you want to call them, they can shoot right down at the ground and miss you completely, and then you can kind of just time your jump and then hop up and kill them. I don't know. There wasn't much to that, but I
just would rush. I would just rush them. I'd see them and I just run and hit them before they would do anything.
One thing I will note that these drones, they actually will respawn if you go off screen. So it seems like all the humanoid-sized enemies don't do that. They respawn if you go off the screen and then come back to the screen, but. These guys will actually respawn, so you don't want to backtrack.
Yeah, you're right. I guess it is the non-human enemies that respawn, because later on there's a flame that comes back.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yep.
Yeah,
and
you have to wonder if that was a conscious decision on their part to do that. If there's something to it, but I guess we'll never know.
They're all dead.
In addition to the projectile drones, I don't know. I have all of my notes say rock throwing machines, so for the sake of I'm going to stick with it. So in addition to those guys, you come up against another enemy also capable of shooting projectiles, and this guy is undoubtedly a machine gun carrying guard.
Yeah, he straight up has an Uzi.
Yeah, and man, I don't know about you guys, but I love the design of him.
Foot soldier.
It's totally like a foot soldier from Ninja Turtles, and he's kind of hunched over in just the right way, and he has these red eyes and this sort of purple getup on, and he's tightly clutching an Uzi in proper 80s action movie fashion.
Yeah, he's ready to kill.
Yeah, absolutely. So this game has you has you moving through.
There was another one that you forgot.
Oh yeah, no, I'm going to get to that guy. Yeah, I didn't leave him out. So this game has you moving through the city streets. You eventually come to a brick wall, presumably a dead end within Waylaid Street, and you have to start getting vertical again. So a pretty fun area. I think this is the first point in the game where you're kind of required to hop up and do some vertical platforming. There's some spikes, if I'm not mistaken. Some spread out platforms, and the game takes advantage of giving you enough distance to cover where you can just get far enough to land and grab the ledge of it. Of the next platform over, which is cool, right? Because like it's more exciting than just landing on the platform to me. It's like, oh man, am I going to make this jump? And then you make the jump and then you just barely make it with your fingertips, just on the edge. And that's a classic adventure fiction trope. So once you've kind of made your way through the vertical platforming of this area, you end up on a rooftop, and you come across the first non-robotic, non-human, non-animal creatures,
monster,
I guess. The first monster, the first otherworldly kind of figure in the game.
Are they really non-human? They just kind of seem like they're like dwarves or something.
They're just dirty dwarves
with golf caps.
So here's what
knives.
I've managed to come across, and this could have been nothing but the whims of some person on the internet, but I kept finding them referred to as mudmen.
Yeah, I can see them being golem-like.
And if you look at the detail paid to the other enemies in the game, particularly the humanoid ones, they all have what are visibly clothes on, various types of outfits. And these mudmen are just they're just peach from top to bottom.
They also have a little
color.
belly.
Yeah, and they're just the right height to be kind of. It's just weird in relation to the proportions of Ricky, and they hold these knives, I guess, overhead in like a sort of downward stabbing position. Something about it reminds me of like an Argento film or something, like Deep Red, like with the evil doll. Kind of just trying to lunge forward and
to me they reminded me of the fleas in Castlevania.
Yeah.
Because when I first saw some jumping, I was like, "Oh man, this is just going to be a flea." But they were a little bit easier than that. But
it's hardly the mess that that those scenes are in Castlevania.
No, they're pretty inconsequel.
Yeah, they're pretty slow compared.
So once you pass the Mudmen, you guys have to remind me. You go indoors,
no,
right?
The boss fight is on the top of a roof.
The boss fight is on the rooftop.
Yeah, well, you just keep on hopping rooftops, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
I think, just going all over.
There's
a
little bit of a leap of faith at some point that you don't really know.
Yeah, there is.
Oh,
one.
yeah. And that's back to that sort of exhilarating. Can I make it or not?
This was the only area there's no extra lives in this area, is there?
I don't remember.
Not that I found.
No.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, I didn't find
no Ricky coins.
So.
No.
Yep.
So once you've made your way through the rooftop areas, you'll eventually come across the game or the stage's boss, who we're calling Rooftop Thief here. And for no other reason than he looks kind of thiefy, I guess. Yeah. In proportion to Ricky, he's gigantic. Yeah. And he is, this long, spindly sort of a guy with a dagger. And he has a massive jump, and it's just a matter of kind of timing it and getting in there. I think this was the first boss fight, and you guys will have to tell me what your experiences were, that I found myself going, oh, I can just brute force the hell out of this guy.
Yep.
And that's something, we can talk about the different ways, I guess, in which you can fight the bosses in this game for the most part. Yeah. And many of the bosses out of the 6 stages, give or take, that the game has, if you... I was explaining this to Frank when he was having some trouble with one of the bosses, and if you can avoid getting hit the first 2 times or so from any of the enemies in the game, you can literally, and you have a full health bar, of course, like a 5 bar or a 5 spot health bar. Then I found that you can dodge those first 2 attacks while attacking them. So you have to put a little bit of effort in to avoid those first couple. And then you can just stand there and tank it and let them hit you, and you just blast away on them. And it's quite effective. I mean, it's not... probably not the way that the game was intended to be played, but so many games just give you one way of beating a boss, especially during this, this kind of classic era of gaming. And I found that if... in some of those older games, if you don't beat the boss the way the boss is intended to be beaten, then you don't beat the boss. and so you have to learn the right way to do it, and it's a matter of trial and error, and that's fine, and that's fun, and that's part of that sort of experience. But this is sort of a advanced way of thinking I found in boss design, for this point in time.
I also think it's worth mentioning that this is where a lot of the speedrun strategies come in, where you can, if you are down to 1 health, then you take 3 damages, 3 good bars off.
Yeah, good point. Yeah,
it's like a red tier, red stone tier ring or whatever in Dark Souls.
Red tier stone ring, totally.
Which is cool because it's like
I
a risk
thought I was
going
to be the first one to mention Dark Souls. I think this boss has some similarities to the archer woman that you do fight, and that you learned, taking from that, you learn that if you're doing it in the finesse way, that you're going to want to let the boss come to you and not the other way around.
Sure.
So maybe it's a stretch, but that's how I felt about it.
Definitely. I think maybe, I can, like I said, I can see it when you explain it that way, but his movements and the difference in size and the lack of projectile, like there were a lot of things that did not make it easy for me to make that a connection. But no, I can totally, the principle of the matter is definitely the same.
Well, what's funny to me is the way the game's designed. I feel like you don't really know how to do the finesse way until you've played through it once.
Agreed.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, the easy way is certainly the tank way. Because if you're trying to do it in a sort of old school fashion, you're going to try to avoid the enemy attacks by default, because that's how these games are played. And then you might do okay a couple of times, and then you're going to go, oh god, I don't have enough health, or whatever, and then you're just going to start spamming attacks. And strangely enough, that is effective in this game. Whereas normally it would just be foolhardy to try to do that in most 8-bit classics. So I don't know, did anyone else have any other thoughts about stage 2 Waylaid Street?
No, I thought it was a really cool it had a great feel, like it had
just bad music.
Bad music. Yeah.
Was it horrible?
No, it wasn't the worst, but
just not great, simplistic.
Well, yeah, but you remember it.
Yeah, because I just watched a speedrun of it.
But then you got the ARPs like it's
and then after 45
that's stage
seconds,
1, dude. That's stage 1.
Yeah, I think you're mixing them up, Frank.
Well, after 45 seconds, it repeats itself either way.
Oh, so. Maybe I'm just...
Yeah, so if you missed it the first time, you'll hear it the other 5,000 times.
Once Ricky makes it through the town, we cut to the scene unfolding inside the Count's castle, involving the interrogation of Ricky's father, Dr. Slater. The Count reveals the limitations of the moon crystal's power coinciding with a full moon, but he intends to build a device called the Lunar system that will allow him to draw on the power of the moon at all times. So the Count tries to appeal to Dr. Slater as a man of science to assist him with the Luna system, but Dr. Slater knows that the Count intends to use his power to create monsters. Unhappy with this response, the Count threatens Dr. Slater by revealing his malicious intentions for the villagers unless Dr. Slater cooperates.
Okay, so with stage 2 out of the way, you've made your way through town and into the Count's domain beyond. And, I want to mention, once you finish that forest stage and you meet Rosalina, there's a great shot of her standing there that sort of tells the whole story. So you have her in the foreground. There's like a kind of a mid-ground area that shows the skyline or whatever of the town, and then you can see perched back on the hill beyond the Count's castle. So it's just kind of neat, and you're foreshadowing where you're heading. And so you've made your way through town, and you're at the Count's castle at this point, and you're navigating your way through it in the attempts to discover where your family is, discover where the villagers are, and put an end to the Count's reign of terror. So, in this game, or in this stage rather, we have, you have a lot of the same enemies. You've got your mudmen. You've got your flying lightning machine, which might be the first time that you come across this thing.
Yeah, that's the first time.
Yeah, up in the trees.
And this one, for someone that hasn't seen it yet, I guess I just want to describe the difference between the two from what you would have seen with the projectile, the rock throwing machine earlier, which is a much smaller thing, about the size of Ricky's head, whereas this other thing is kind of a giant blue-purple device that has a propeller on top, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, yeah. And so it's got this propeller and a band of spikes sort of around a central cylinder, and I guess like a Tesla coil or a pair of Tesla coils coming off the bottom.
Kind of.
Kind of. Yeah, maybe it wasn't a pair, but it's a single coil that sort of shoots out a pair of electrical arcs.
I find that really cool that it kind of makes you want to, like, if you don't know, because that happened to me, I was like, oh, I'm just going to run away from it, but then you can't. It hits you, right?
Right. And it's also got a really cool feature, too, where if you're patient, or if you found yourself in a situation where you haven't managed to get a hit in on it yet, and you're not surrounded by other enemies that are sort of prompting you to continue to move forward, you can stand in one spot, and this thing will periodically attack as it's making its way over to you. It'll get right above you, and then it will just proceed to shoot out arcs on either side of you without actually hitting you. So it's essentially locking you into a spot, which I thought was kind of neat. Like, sort of tells its own tale with what this machine's programming or something would have been. But yeah, so you come across this thing like in the treetops, which is as strange a place as any. The Count's drones, and
that's the thing to note, is that you don't go in the front gate. You don't go in the front
True.
door. This which is smart. You're going to want to go, if you could climb up a tree and go up a window somewhere.
Yeah, and it's I find that really cool, because I wasn't taking the tree route, and then I just got to the end and I was like, oh wait, I gotta take the back door. I gotta go up, and I find that really cool.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. And once you get inside, it's traditional castle fare, I guess. You're navigating around. There's a couple of cool spots that I enjoyed. Was a little bit of a timed puzzle, I guess, for lack of a better term. You hit a switch in a certain area, and you have a limited amount of time to climb back up a staircase that you came down to hit the switch, and then you've got so much time to get through a pair of slowly lowering
spike gates.
Lowering spike. Yeah, they're like gates. Yeah, like little portcullises.
And they'll totally hit you if they come down in your head. They'll take off some life.
Cool. Yeah, I never got hit by one, but I certainly got caught between the first pair, a couple of times. Unfortunately, it's cool because, the game gives you this little objective, and if you somehow don't time it right, I think, at least to me, it seemed easiest to get through the first gate, only to fail getting through the second gate. But the game gives you like an opening, like a pit. So you can stand there and you can go, oh, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I guess I'll just fall down this pit and die. And you fall down the pit and you end up in, you end up in the room again with where the trigger was. So, you can do it again, of course, until you get it right. And then it's just a matter of moving on after that. But there's a couple examples of that in this castle. And it all kind of keeps up with that, Castlevania kind of a vibe. I mean, you don't really have time puzzles in a lot of the classic Castlevania games, but it's fitting with a traditional villainous sort of motif.
Yeah.
Because this guy is very like theatric. The Count
with his monocles.
Yeah, his top hat and cape.
And that first timed gate puzzle teaches you really well for the second one, which is it's actually 3 gates, I think, right? The second one, and it's a way shorter window.
Yeah. No, it's cool. The game has some really cool. It makes some great decisions, I think, and it's rewarding when you, when you learn how to do what it is they want you to do. So, making your way through the castle, you end up down in some areas at one point, and then kind of back up, and you eventually come across, the boss room, and it is the Count. And as we mentioned, he's decked out in top hat and monocle. And this massive cape, and he has a cane, and he goes through this whole process of he's got some interesting attack moves that can be a little bit frustrating.
Some nice ninja moves.
Yeah, he's very very acrobatic for a man with snow white hair. So this, I have to admit, was the first time that in the game that I was like, man, I don't know that I'm going to be able to finish this game.
Yeah, it's
because it's tough and it's jarring in like an old school, man, this is tough kind of a way. But it's funny in hindsight. I look back on it and go, oh man, that was nothing. I don't know. Does anyone want to talk anything further about the boss fight?
No,
you disagree with it? It's nothing.
It was and still is my worst boss. Like
okay.
if it's rare. I don't think I've ever played without dying to the boss. Done a playthrough.
I think it's that rooftop thief fight and that realization that the bosses can be brute forced if you get those first couple of clean hits in.
That's probably what because I stopped doing the brute forcing thing, and this guy zips all around all over the place, and
he's got a huge
cane
jump
attack. The thing is, like his cane attack, it hits you before you even start swinging, which is weird. So that's rough.
And he has an aerial attack too, which kind of keeps you on your toes, where he leaps into the air and sort of hovers for a second and shoots down
some dirks at you or whatever.
Yeah. They kind of light up, if I recall correctly. I thought they might have been like electrical charges or something, but
I think they're just red daggers.
Were they red? For some reason, my mind is recalling it as yellow, but
I thought it was more like silver. But I'm the colorblind one, so
don't ask Brian.
Let's not put me into account. Yeah.
Joseph, you have to make the call here. What color were the projectiles? You remember?
I actually don't remember because this is a boss that I didn't really have any problems with, and I felt like I could totally bum rush him and do the whole brute force thing on him.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's the easiest way to get him for sure. But Brian likes to do everything the hard way when it comes to these video games.
He's trying to do things legit.
I did want to one more thing before we get done with this level. There are zombies in this, and the only creatures that take more than one hit. And I read somewhere, I can't credit it where I read it, but this is actually perhaps proof that the Luna system is already working.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And I wonder if the Mudmen weren't somehow anything monstrous in this game, because there's some stuff that we'll touch base on a little more. But there's some anomalies, some abominations lurking around, and the cutscenes do a decent enough job of painting a detailed story. But there's some things that are just kind of left to the imagination or lost in translation. I'm not quite sure. These zombies, I'm glad you remembered to bring them up, because I had kind of looked away from my notes for a second. The best looking zombie in an 8-bit game, period.
Yeah.
They look
I'm
really
locking
good,
it in. To take a quote from the great Subhuman Cast
Subhuman
podcast.
Cast, yeah.
If you haven't listened to it yet, make sure you go to iTunes, download it, give it 5 stars, and write a sterling rating for it.
Can we get the lock-in sound too?
I don't know. I think that's copywritten. I don't know that we're going to be able to get the lock-in.
I mean, you can buy it.
I think I know the host, so maybe we'll pull some strings, but
we'll see what we can do.
Nevertheless, best looking zombie uses the color palette so successfully. These like 3 or 4 shades of this gross looking brown. The animations of the zombies are on par with the quality of Ricky's animation. I wish that there were more of them. In the game.
There should be way more.
Yeah, like a slew of them. And the game, it was only on the second playthrough that it dawned on me that it wasn't the zombies in the very, very opening cutscene that were attacking Ricky's parents. I know that seems obvious now in hindsight, but the shadowy assailants that we mentioned when we described the cutscene, they're the purple moon cultists and machine gun guards and whatnot. But just in the scene prior to that, you see that moment where Ricky and Merle, his sister, are like having they're having this childhood type of conversation about the creepy cemetery outside the village, and you see these zombies rise up out of the ground. So for some reason, after that first playthrough, I kind of went... On the first playthrough, I went through it in chunks. Like, I played a little bit, I'd beat a stage, I'd play a little bit, beat a stage. And I think enough time had passed between me thinking about that opening cutscene and seeing it a second time that it all kind of clicked together. But yeah, I mentioned all of that long-windedly to point out that the zombies, that this is really the first time that you see an actual zombie. So it does kind of support that idea of, full moon in this world, setting, town, whatever, has some strange effects, perhaps. Even if it's not the moon crystal in full effect or the Luna system, there's definitely something going on.
Yeah.
But, I don't know.
I think it might have been just my imagination getting carried away, but they kind of reminded me of just a regular sprite version of the Sweet Home cutscene zombie, which is the really famous one.
Oh yeah, it's fitting. It's definitely in the vibe with that. But that Sweet Home cutscene zombie is way more detailed. And I think it has clothes on too, whereas these
tattered
zombies
clothes.
are just kind of So in addition to the zombie, there's also, this is the first stage where you come across these tentacle pods, these sort of bulbous, fleshy red sacks that are on the ground in certain parts of the stage. That when you get close enough to, an explosion of tendrils sort of like jut out from the top. Real cool. Like, I mean, it satisfies that love of body horror that I have. You don't want that thing to get near you.
Yeah, it's very, it reminded me a lot of Ninja Gaiden. I don't know.
Yeah, we keep mentioning the Ninja Gaiden, and the comparisons are fair. I mean, I don't want anyone to be a diehard Ninja Gaiden fan and go, oh man, I really got to check this out, because your experience is going to be very different. So don't expect it to be the same. But there are certainly, if you're looking deep enough, it's not too hard to come up with some comparisons, whether it be the cutscenes or the mechanics themselves.
Well, while you're talking about the, you see the tentacle pods in this stage for the first time, and you don't see them that often throughout the game, and same with the Mudmen, how you don't see them that often. And that's one thing I like about this game a lot, is that it's almost, rather than having some kind of ecosystem where you see the same enemies over and over, it's almost like just a collection of accidents that are scattered throughout the world.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you use that word ecosystem, and I feel that maybe it's just the way that I'm choosing to use that as a definition, but I think it implies more of an ecosystem, because depending on where you are, these things are, right? And so it would make sense to see the guards in greater number than it would be to see these creepy mudmen. And like, why are these mudmen like located on a roof or on the floor? They're kind of like golems outside of the Count's castle.
I think what I mean by accidents is just the fact that there's a finite number of these kind of escaped or creatures that have been put on the prowl or put in certain places. Like, it doesn't feel like there's an infinite number of pods, of tentacle pods or mudmen. There's like 8 mudmen in this world that have been created, and they're all present and accounted for.
Yeah, no, and it just all ties into the overall aesthetic of the game, and like the sort of plot. This weird kind of unexplained pseudoscience mysticism involved with a stone. I don't know. It's all having a lasting impact on me, and I just really kind of like the world that it creates.
Yeah, for sure.
With the castle conquered and the Count defeated, we get a scene revealing the showdown between Ricky and who we presume to be the Count. But the man reveals that he is in fact a fake Count, and the real Count is actually on to Maclona Island, and that his research will soon be complete.
Okay, so we get the fake Count reveal, which is kind of cool, and sort of an old school, the princess is in another castle, kind of a way. And, we learn that he's on Maclana Island, so as opposed to another cutscene of Ricky learning where the docks are and, going through all that again, we find ourselves on a dock and hopping onto a ship, and then the ship sets into motion, and we end up over the water. So the ship is populated, as you might expect, by pirates for whatever reason. We've got a slight assortment, I guess. A couple of guys. The game does a good job of replacing the moon cultists and Ninja Turtle foot soldiers with something that you would expect to see on a ship. So, sword dudes,
dudes,
scimitar dudes,
and carnival strongmen.
No neck. They had no neck.
No neck, no shoes in proper pirate fashion. Or at least there's always that one guy in the pirate movie that has no shoes on.
Oh yeah, and then the scimitar guy has a bandana, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, of course.
And I thought that this game, as far as the stage goes, did a really good job of going, okay, they're on a ship. we need to give them a stage. It's a massive ship, so maybe in terms of size and scale, it's a little bit unrealistic in that regard. But it needed to hit certain beats, and I feel like it did that. Ricky needs to go vertical, and he needs to climb up on ledges, and so let's have him get over the mast. Yeah. Exactly. And my mind immediately goes to that because I thought that was one of the neater, more original things that you come across in comparison to some of the other stages, and that the aforementioned bald bruiser, circus strongman, bald-headed pirate character there's a couple of them in different areas, and it's kind of neat because you have the ones that are located on the mast have a job essentially to do of keeping you from climbing the mast and getting onto the other side of the mast and then traveling forward. So when you stand flat on a platform on the mast, every so few seconds, the strongman will butt his head or shove his shoulder or something against the central column of the mast, and it will cause you to drop down to the previous screen. Or if you're multiple platforms up on the same screen, then it'll just drop you down one platform down. And I thought that was kind of cool because that's the only way that you interact with that guy. There's a couple of them, I believe, on the different masts, but it was just kind of a neat way to interact with them, and you needed to get your timing right, and the first couple of times you do it, you're going to fall. And so it gave you an obstacle that you couldn't immediately overcome without punishing you. You could have fallen to your death, or it could have knocked you off off into the water. And so your punishment is you have to climb back up, which is simple and fine because you're doing a thing that you enjoy doing anyhow, which is moving through the game and navigating the pitfalls. And so, I don't know, just kind of thought it was cool. And so when you come across this bald character the second time, he's on the ship's deck, and he's got a whole separate set of moves. I mean, he'll jump and punch and do a whole thing, and it just looks completely different. So it's not too often in 8-bit games I find that you'll come across the same enemy twice.
Do different
and
things.
He has two completely different versions of him. So.
Yeah. What I realized about this level that was kind of frustrating for me was this is the first one that kind of gives you the Medusa head kind of enemy, which is the seagull that goes straight at your face.
Those things, I hated them. I almost threw my controller.
Nice.
You know what? Even more so than Medusa heads, what they remind me of, and this is way worse, is the all the birds in Karate Kid on NES.
For sure. Yeah. Their flight path is fast, and it's not telegraphed, and it's like a bolt of lightning. It's definitely more like Karate Kid in that
Can
regard.
you even knock these things out of the air if you
you can destroy them.
I didn't try.
Yeah, you can.
Oh, I never did. Yeah,
you can destroy them, but the thing is, you can't. Ricky's duck is so slow that actually, when you know they're coming, you have to duck immediately as soon as you land, just to premeditate their attack.
Well, I found that when you jump, anything below your knees isn't actually part of your hitbox as far as these guys were concerned. The birds were concerned. So just jumping a little bit, I found
these birds did not care about my hitbox personally.
Well, so once you've made your way through the mast areas and kind of down into the you go down into the belly of the ship at one point.
Below decks.
Yeah. Anything about that area in particular you guys want to talk about?
I did want to note, so you get down to the one area, and then if you go all the way to the right, I think it was past the machine gun guard. I think that's, maybe there wasn't, I can't remember what it was, but basically you could see a chest to the right, and then when you go lower, the next area lower, you don't ever find that chest or any ladder upwards. However, there is a gap upwards, which... If you find if you jump up into that gap, you're able to access a secret room with a 1-up.
See, that's awesome, and that's neat, and that is a sort of area reveal that is exclusive to a game that has these ledge climbing abilities, right? Because in most instances, you're not going to have the ability to make a jump that's an entire a massive room-sized gap away. But I don't know. That's pretty cool. I remember seeing it. I distinctly remember the area that you're referring to, but I never put 2 and 2 together to jump up through the hole. So that's really cool.
Yeah, give it a shot sometime.
Yeah. So once you're finished in the belly of the ship, you make your way back up top, and meanwhile, there are occasionally you'll come across some, I guess we'll call them rotating cannons. that you'll have to dodge. There's not really too much to say about that.
Or you can attack their bullets.
Yeah, totally knock them out of the air.
Exactly. That's not a thing that I ever did, so I wasn't aware of that. I would just try to avoid them as best I could. But that's
I was
really
hoping
cool.
I could reflect them back at him. I was like, oh, that would be
That'd
cool.
be nice.
Yeah, that might be too much.
You can't destroy them at all. The only thing that's nice about that is that you can actually stand within them, essentially, and they won't be able to attack you at all.
That's I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
So beyond the rotating cannons, you will find yourself on the back side of the ship, and all of our seafaring listeners are going to have to forgive my starboard bow, all that stuff.
Aft?
I can't recall. Aft? Is it aft?
I think so.
Okay, well, you end up on the back of the ship, and where the captain of the ship is set up, and he's a doozy, folks.
Yeah.
Let me just tell you, he's a doozy. You have to kind of set a portrait here, then I'll turn you guys loose on this guy. You've got a couple of gaps, and throughout the stage there are these gaps where it looks like you can't make your way any further, but there are portholes in the side of the ship where it looks like cannons might be sticking out. They never fire off, but it's just some sort of porthole. Yeah. And you land on top of these portholes, and they double as platforms, but they don't look immediately like that would be the case. And so in this boss area, one of those is there as an example, and you can leap down and avoid his attacks. So he starts off launching projectiles at you. He's shooting a gun, and then if you get close enough to him, he starts to swing a sword. I don't know. How do you guys feel about this guy? What was your experience trying to fight this boss?
This was like, I actually heard you talk about this in our little chat. You just you casually mentioned the pirate boss. So
yeah,
I had it in the back of my head. So as soon as I was on the pirate ship, I was thinking like, I bet there's a pirate boss here that Brandon was talking about. And sure enough, this was my first roadblock for this game. And I have good news for everyone, though. If you stand on one of those portholes, you can actually just live there forever.
Yeah.
And never have to fight him and never go forward. Yeah.
The ship never gets where its destination is. And
exactly.
Yeah.
Frank, so you most recently fought this guy, unless one of you did it today. You did it most recently for the first time, I'll say. Talk to me about that experience, please.
So far, the game for me was like, okay, it's hard, but it's manageable. Like I was kind of like, oh yeah, it's just an old NES game. I can get through it. Like the magician, I'm calling him the magician because he kind of looked like one. But the faux Crimson, Count Crimson, he was hard, but I was like, okay, I was taking him as like a Ninja Gaiden boss. I was like, okay, he's hard, but he's I can do it. But then I got to this boss, and then when you walk into the screen, I don't know if it was just my game or just how it is, he wasn't doing anything. And then I wasn't doing anything, and we were just looking at one another. And then I was like, okay.
In true standoff fashion.
And then I jumped down to the cannon, and I was like, okay. Then I jumped up, and then he was shooting, and then I got hit. And I was like, okay, well, let me just take a minute to get his pattern down. And I tried him I had a save state on the cannon just because like I kept dying, and then I would just like
that's as good a place as any.
Yeah, and then I would have my double jump, and then I just go double jump, and then I figured out that my turning is too slow. This is where you feel it, because you have to double jump over him and then turn around to hit him, but you can never do it because he hits you first. And then
well, the problem too is that when you're attempting to jump over him, you have such a small window to do it because the arc that his cutlass carves through the air is massive, and so it really does make for a precarious.
Yeah, and then I was texting you guys. I was just like, oh man, F this boss, like whatever. I'll game genie it. I don't care, whatever. And then Brandon was like, I just brute force him, like try to get like 2 hearts out, and then just wail on him. And then I just saw the text. I tried it, and I just beat him. I was like, oh okay, like never mind the finesse, never mind all that stuff. Just just jump into his face and just wail on him.
But it's great because there's 2 ways of doing it, and either way you do it, you have to discover that,
absolutely.
Right? I mean, like you just wouldn't know, and so I don't know. I really like the boss.
I just didn't have the patience to learn the finesse way because I was almost there. Like I was doing the midair turns, like the 360 turns, and then I was like or 180 turns, and I was kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, I think I've got it, and then I kept dying, and then I was like, never mind this.
Well, you know what? This is the first boss that I was able to finesse in my playthroughs, and it was really satisfying to be like, oh, I feel like I broke the game almost, kind of, he's not hitting me, and I'm hitting his head and all this stuff. So that was really satisfying.
Yeah, I have to admit, I have not reached a point where I have been able to finesse this guy yet, and I think I have to assume at this point 2 times through that it's not from failure, it's from lack of trying, I guess. I kind of goofed the first time and then ran into a roadblock and had a bunch of difficulty with him, and then figured it out. And then the second time through, I was like, I think I'm just going to brute this guy. I don't want to, because I was trying to beat it in like in a single session, and so I didn't have time to try to figure it out. But going forward, especially if I do another run and I try to really master the batting away the projectiles, I'm going to try to take a different approach to some of the bosses.
And that was another thing that I was really hoping that you could just like reflect the bullets back at him. I thought that was the gimmick.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, this would be cool if that's the gimmick. But there's no boss gimmicks, unfortunately.
If only.
No. But it's just like, okay, there's nothing. Fine.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, the second time that I went through the game, I got just as mad at this boss as the first time. It was almost like playing him all over again, and I didn't finesse him. I was like, you know what, screw this. It takes
too much.
The risk reward isn't there for me. The satisfaction, and like I'm not at the skill level yet where I can come in with one heart and confidently run up, because it's a very small window where your ability to stand next to him and successfully hit him.
Yeah.
Right. There's a little bit of that, and then the thing again, like if you jump, it seems like it's not exactly iframes, but you're
blinking.
Yeah, no, you get out of their reach if you jump. So and just a little bit even. So that'll actually tick down as his wide his cutlass arc will actually take it down very little. So you just have to. Whenever he's about to swing, just got to do it right away.
I couldn't get the timing right. For me, it was just like get hit, and then if you get hit, you can get like 3 or 4 hearts out of him, and then you get hit, and then you take
right. Yeah, I definitely. It didn't turn out to be that bad for me in the end, but I definitely could have. His health was insane. It was like the whole bar across.
Yeah, he's hardy for sure.
Could have maybe used a few less
fewer
hearts there.
Maybe.
Yeah,
right.
I think.
I was also hoping that I could make him fall off the ship. I was like,
oh, me too.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
That would have been a cool other thing, that if you can jump behind him or at the same time that he's walking forward, he could have kept walking or something, but no.
Once the ship captain is defeated, we get a scene involving Ricky and Rosina on Maklana Island, where it is revealed that the Count is in his laboratory. But Rosina explains that it is imperative that Ricky save the villagers first, and that they have been sent to the mines beneath the island. Ricky questions Rosina's presence on the island, and she reveals that the Count is her father, and that she is aiding Ricky in order to stop her father's evil plans. So, following Rosina's instructions, Ricky heads to the mines. As you might assume, this is all located underground in a very rocky-looking, lots of browns and blacks. Ricky, I guess this is the first stage to include stage threats, I guess I'm going to call them. Other than pits, you have these. You've got traps in the Count's castle as far as the falling,
I suppose,
portcullises But with this one, there's some areas, since it is a mine, where there are these mine shafts where you've got some giant boulders that begin to fall down. This is also a stage that introduces the gargoyle for the first time. Which, keeping with that sort of supernatural thing, which came first, the moon crystal or the gargoyle? Maybe this is a setting where the gargoyle pre-existed, but we'll just never know.
So you sure this wasn't the red armor?
Yeah.
To me, he looks.
There's a recurring theme here in the games we play.
He looks like that Mudman with wings.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, the color palette's almost
identical.
identical.
Belly's kind of chubby and.
Well, Brandon, you mentioned obstacles, and there's also the steam vents.
Oh yeah,
that blow steam. And from what I understand, those are, I don't know if I guess it wouldn't be true for the boulders because those are more random. But I guess I heard that these are on a global timer throughout the level, so they're just running. Oh. So when you come to them, you know what pattern they're going to be on basically if you come at a certain time.
Boy, knowing something about global timing would require just a lot more exposure to this game than I've had time for yet.
Well, give it time.
No, that's pretty cool. Yeah. And we're beating a dead horse here with our appreciation for some of the level design choices in this game, but I'm going to continue to echo that with the fact that you start the game off and you're essentially in a bored out mine tunnel, mine shaft, and it's as you would expect. And once you get deeper, and I want to mention this in particular because Joseph just brought up the steam vents, there's like a section with scaffolding and iron or steel platforms and ladders and or staircases rather that lead you down further into the mine. And yeah, I don't know. My appreciation for this stage was cool because it's like it is the darkest, spookiest looking area in the game so far. Especially, and the game does a great job of contrasting one stage to the next because the pirate stage is very bright and you have these, a lot of blue skies when you're above deck, and even the stuff below is this kind of warm brown tone. But in contrast to that, once you get down into these mines, it's a dark affair. So I did enjoy that, and you make your way through this mine, and it's the first stage where you're attempting to go. You're going vertically, but you're going down instead of up, which is none of the other stages really do that that I can recall. So I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts about the mines here in particular? While we're just kind of milling about.
I kind of like the mechanic of like these the Mega Man 2-esque like platforms that make you go fast or slow, and
the conveyor belts and everything.
The conveyor belts, sure.
I find that cool because you got to do some platforming at the same time, so you got to time it right, and then you got these rocks that fall on you. So I don't know. Overall, I thought it was a really cool level.
Well, I want to ask: did you guys find this secret area?
No.
I actually don't know.
Okay, so if you get to if you remember the first zombie is where there's kind of like a ramp downward.
Sure.
And to the left of the zombie area, there's like this big, it's kind of like dark wall. That's actually an illusory wall.
No way!
You can jump right through it. Yep. There is a spider, an extra life, and I think it's a heart container.
An extra,
a big heart.
Well, why didn't you leave a note for me while I was playing so I could have known?
I know. Well, actually, that makes it so this is the only boss other than the end boss that if you die, like fighting the boss and then get sent back to the last checkpoint, you can actually make it back to the boss with 5 hearts.
Oh nice.
So,
this is the boss you don't need it on.
Yeah, exactly, but if you're doing the sloppy tank maneuver, I could definitely see a scenario where he's going to get a couple of hits on you. Unless you guys have anything specific to say further about the Maclana mine, I think I'd like to. I guess we'll just move into the boss talk. Yeah. So you have a guy who's basically a souped up Abobo version of the guy on the ship, the bald-headed bruiser, right? I mean, it's not identical, but the gimmick is the same. He has a massive head, no neck, a giant muscular physique.
I think he has a weight belt too, if I'm not mistaken.
That could be, yeah. I can't think in particular what
that's what my memory has of him, anyways.
Yeah. But he's in a dead end of a room, and you walk upon him, and he starts lobbing grenades. He starts lobbing giant boulders at you, which might as well be grenades.
Brandon gets rocks and grenades mixed up a lot.
Easily, yeah. I don't know the difference to our listeners at home between a bullet and a pebble, so don't let me play with the weapons, please. But this guy, he'll toss these massive boulders, and when they hit the ground, they'll split into kind of smaller projectiles, and which makes their area of effect much greater. And that's kind of it. I mean, what was everyone's approach to tackling
just
this guy.
Run
just
in,
head on.
Run in and just wail on him because he won't attack as fast as, like, let's say the pirate guy. So you got to wait for him to throw the rock and stuff. So
he won't attack that fast, and his attacks are really easy to avoid, and they're telegraphed pretty well. So I think difficulty-wise, this should be like an earlier boss even than it is.
Sure, yeah. I like the aesthetics of this. I just thought about it right now, thinking about the guy throwing the rocks and this whole mineshaft thing. It's very Demon Souls. I don't know if you guys play Demon Souls.
Oh, sure.
The 2-1 is very like this. It's
right. I can see that.
All things lead back.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
yeah. This is the souls of Hex gaming.
My strat was if I run at him, then he's going to throw a rock, and then that's going to the explosion area effect, or what are those small rocks that go out? They shoot out far enough away back that it's not going to hit me while I'm trying to hit his head. And then when he picks up the rock to throw another one at me, that one's gonna be close, and I go all the way far away from him, and I just repeat from there. I run at him. He's gonna throw one that's not gonna impede me hitting his face, and then he'll throw the second one to just kind of repeat.
Well, for me, it was just like run in, hit him. I think I lost 3 hearts maximum. I think I just tanked him for 3 hearts.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the last time that I played through it. That was the method. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely a prime example of a boss that doesn't really move around. So you're really just dealing with his, with his massive boulders. But if you can just get in there and you've got the health to do it, you can make it happen.
One thing that I think you guys might, I don't know if you'll agree with me, but I think it might be worth mentioning just because I've been watching all the speed runs. And one thing that they do, to save a few frames is to kill themselves right after a boss explodes, so they won't.
Oh, does that actually saves frames?
Yeah. So
I thought that was just playing
what it does is I guess it skips. It like hurries you on to the next section, basically. Like it skips a little waiting.
I had seen that in one of the speed runs, but I wasn't sure what the
I thought it was just for joke.
For it, but.
No, it apparently saves a marginal amount of time, and
cool.
So. But there are some levels like the count. In the count stage, you can't kill yourself, but in this stage, you'd think you couldn't. But there's like a jumping glitch where you can kind of jump off your lowest jump and then do a double jump. I think is how they do it, and you can actually, if you do it at the right time, you can jump and kill yourself on the spike with your last health, and then do it there. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, I saw people trying to do that. I guess the speedrun I saw, they weren't able to. Interesting.
The villagers are rescued, and we learn from Ricky's mother that Merle was taken by the Count, who intends to begin testing the power of the moon crystal by experimenting on her. With Merle and Dr. Slater's lives at stake, Ricky sets out to stop the Count once and for all.
All right, so we have saved the villagers and had a nice moment with Ricky returning with his mother in the previous cutscene there, and she urges him to go forward, and you've got extra motivation now because before it was just Ricky's father at stake, and now it's Merle as well. Not to mention the lives of everyone around there. So you head into the secret laboratory of Count Crimson, and holy Mega Man! Did anyone else get that vibe?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's a little slower paced than Mega Man, obviously, but there's just so much of this screams Dr. Wily. The tons of spikes and
lightning,
like little lightning fields, and you have these sections where you kind of make your way through a tunnel, hallway, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, and the floor and ceiling will jut out these massive spikes, great big spikes, very Mega Man feeling, and lots of other stuff too, Castlevania and whatever else. But you've got little gaps, where you kind of get in, and you can kind of avoid being hit by them, and then move on to the next one. I thought that was cool. This game also has some wall spikes in sections, and if listeners of the show that have been with us since the beginning will recall my complaint on the Little Nemo episode, where there were some horizontal spikes that, for whatever reason, you couldn't touch them. Like if you came in contact with the underside, the flat, non-pointed side of the spike, it would kill you. And this game does the thing that I wanted to do.
I thought about you during this part. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is to say you can jump on them and land on them just like you could a platform, and literally just stand there. And they're not very big, and it's not that big of a deal, but just a tiny detail that I enjoyed. So, looking at our list of enemies, it's all standard fare.
There's nothing new,
point.
I think.
You're seeing, it's all kind of coming back into full swing with the sort of humanoid stuff that you would assume to be in the laboratory, though. So I feel like they made some good selections. You needed to have your humans. You needed to have all the different types of machines. So you've got your flying lightning machine. I'm almost positive there's some rock machines, even though it's not in my notes here. You got your moon cultists and machine gun guards, grenade guards, the whole shebang. Everyone that should be in the lab,
guarding the lab.
Is here.
That's what they're doing.
Yeah. Any moments in particular stand out to you guys on this first section? I guess it's not really giving anything away to reveal that Stage 6, the laboratory, is divided up essentially into 3 sections, which is kind of cool. And they feel like continuations of the story.
Yeah.
They're all just long enough to make sense for them to have stopped, and they are all based around you making your way to the Luna system. Having an encounter with a boss, then needing to leave the room with the Luna system and continue to pursue the final boss, and then you have the final boss encounter. You've got these sort of, it's like 3 sections, and it's cool, and also kind of a Mega Man thing, right?
The last Dr. Wily
stages, whereas all the other stages are just single contained units. So, so part 1, any final thoughts
pretty
on
simple.
that?
I mean, I kind of think that this is a really good culmination of the level design, and it's actually, bosses notwithstanding, I think that this game in general has a really good difficulty curve overall, and this is it's totally reasonable, especially once you've played through it a couple of times. Like Stage 6 is fun. I enjoy playing it. It doesn't bother me.
It is fun. And I would totally agree. And I would also point out that much of what you'll deal with in Stage 6 is kind of a breath of fresh air if traversing stages and fighting enemies has grown maybe a little tired at this point, because I feel like even though all the standard guys are there, like there's the added aspect of needing to avoid being hit by spikes, and ducking and moving through electric fields, and you're given some stage stuff, which I suppose you kind of were with the falling random boulders in the mine, but I don't know, something about it just kind of felt like it does stand out more. It's like the Count's like crazy laboratory. The same nut job that built the castle, built this laboratory, and it shows.
And what's amazing is they don't actually mix the enemies in unfairly. They don't do it in an annoying way where it's not like, oh no, you have to fight this and get through this electric field. It's kind of one or the other. With the exception, I thought the flying lightning machines were a little annoying in this stage if you didn't get to them in time.
Yeah, you have to get to them in time, and then oftentimes I can think of one in particular that really stands out in my mind that involves a vertical platform leading down to a field of projecting spikes, we'll call them. And if you head down like you're ready to deal with those spikes, one of those flying machines with the lightning will kind of make his way through an area that you can't travel through, essentially the wall, and come out and then kind of double back, pinning you between the spike field and and itself. I don't know, but once you're aware of it, it's pretty easy to deal with before you get down there.
Yeah, and this game's really good at giving you individual challenges, especially you get used to them over and over the more you play, and you end up replaying stuff a lot, so I remember a lot of them specifically, like the one where you go up into the room and there's a flying machine coming down and there are boots to the right, and you can like get the boots and then run over and jump out of its way and slash it. I don't know, it's kind of, I thought there was they put a lot of effort into just thinking about what would be what have we taught the players to this point?
Yeah.
What can they do?
Sure. And also showing you a little new, or something newer with that is the couple of areas that involve moving platforms. So you have these tiny little cubes, and you have to time. So you have to grab one, essentially hanging off of it, and you have to pull yourself up. But the animation time for pulling Ricky up onto the platform needs to be just so that you avoid the ceiling spikes, allowing you enough time to not get hit there, but also get up on top of it and get enough movement across that small square to do a running jump and land on the other side. It's certainly the pinnacle of what this game has been teaching you these past 5 stages comes to fruition here, and I think it's really cool.
Once Ricky makes his way to a certain point in the laboratory, he'll come upon the Luna system and his father, who is putting the finishing touches on it. This happy reunion is cut short, though, when the Count appears with Merle in hand. In true villainous fashion, the Count flees with Merle and unleashes his best henchman on Ricky.
So we have finally found the Luna system, and it is a giant contraption, as one might imagine, set into the background, and you're, for all intents and purposes, in a boss arena. And I liked the fact that you see. I guess I'm so used to playing these 8-bit games where there are no cutscenes, and to see the cutscene with the Count and having Merle in his clutches. And then that sort of fade in of the blue armor behind him. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Very, very effective and very imposing, So blue armor is what we're calling this boss. I'm not sure. I don't think any of these bosses are given names on screen, so you just have to use your imagination. But he's essentially a giant blue bullet-headed, kind of like an onion knight, perhaps, if you will, from Dark Souls fame. But he appears. He has a massive sword, and on my first playthrough, lots of frustration.
Really?
Fought this dummy and had a hell of a time with him. Second time through, I discovered that if you can trigger his attack sequence, he does 3. He goes 1, 2, 3 with his sword, 3 downward strikes. You jump over each of the little sparks as they travel beneath your feet. And then you have this opening to get your hit in on him. And so I got to the point where I could beat him with no damage taken. Very easily. I mean, at this point, he's just it's completely non-point.
Wow, that's really interesting. I thought you pretty much had to
go
that's
what I did. I would double jump behind him, hit him, double jump behind him, hit him.
Well, you know what? That just shows how impatient I am with these bosses, because I knew you didn't have to go behind them, because I like when I tried to finesse it, I was doing the thing where you kind of flip over their head and try and hit them as you're going over, or like right before you pass over them.
Sure.
But that's really tedious. And the first time I got so mad the first time I fought this boss that I was literally save stating in the middle of the boss fight, which is the ultimate shame.
We got a name for that, Brian.
Scumming.
Save scumming.
But yeah, I was so impatient the first time I fought him. He's a little better now, but I didn't even sit around to see if he had a set number of attacks. I just assumed he kept doing it.
And once you've defeated him, hopefully with the full health bar, you're going to see the blue armor shirk off his various levels of defense. It sort of all explodes off of him, revealing beneath an even more interesting boss, which is to say a dwarf, I guess.
Yeah.
He looks weird inside of a mech suit. He's kind of... I guess mech suit isn't quite the right term.
Maybe an exosuit.
It's like Krang's Walker.
An exosuit.
Krang's Walker?
Yeah,
it's like
Krang's. You know what it kind of reminds me of is remember the scene in Labyrinth where the door comes to life, and then when they Hoggle or Ludo or whoever knocks the thing off the top, and then you've got there's like this little guy operating from that sort of topless approach. Cool fight.
You know what I was thinking though is that he's like kind of brownish orangey colored, like so maybe he's kind of one of the more evolved or less screwed up versions of the Mudmen. He's
could be. If I'm not mistaken, though, there are a couple of scenes, especially early on. It might even be the scene where the family gets attacked and the Count shows up. They're kind of blending together. You'll have to forgive me, but there is a moment earlier on where you see the person riding inside of this mech next to the Count. So he's like his Igor or something. Exactly, implying that it's his Igor or his right-hand minion. I'm almost positive. You'll have to play for yourself to see if I'm a fool. And if you do find out that is the case, please write in and let us know. So completely different experience. And if you've listened to our Joe and Mac episode, you'll know how much we love multi-stage boss fights where you get a different look, you get a different set of attacks, and this is very similar to that in that regard. Who wants to talk about their experience fighting this second stage?
I don't know. This boss was not that hard for me, and on the first try, I knew that.
Well, maybe explain to people how you what did you do right away? Like what was the approach for this guy? Maybe start off by talking about what he does and then how you combated that.
I got away with the blue armor like without getting hit because I just assumed that I had to hit him in the back and I just kept the double jump hit, and then when it peeled off, I just tanked him. That's all I did. I didn't even see his full moveset, I think. Because he does this little.
All right. Well, did anyone else spend more time
thing with his arms? Right. There's these chain arms that kind of go shrank.
Yeah, he does kind of almost like a punching glove kind of move out of front. But I had a really tough time with him, this boss, and I ended up doing a little dance with him where we were both jumping, flipping around the stage, and what I ended up doing, the way I ended up defeating him without being a scumbag, is I would basically just flip around with him, and I would just kind of hit him as I was flipping off or before I landed or something, just whatever I could do where it would be before he would send off his little punch.
Okay.
And then I would just keep dancing around the room with him. So.
Yeah, fighting him on the ground is, he does a ton of damage and he has a long range. Let's put it this way. It's not a long range. It's a much longer range than you have. And if you're trying to go toe to toe with him and you don't, brute force him into submission right away, he can quickly get some good punches in on you. But yeah, I did the same aerial dance, and twice now, and I don't, I didn't mess around with it either. I mean, if he hits the ground and he's not far enough away for me to trigger him to jump towards me, then I just back up and until he's. Because you have to be a certain distance before he'll make that hop. Because otherwise he'll just walk forward and then paint you into a corner and just blast you with his fists. So,
well, the thing to note is that if you want him to do that punch out, so you can get behind him to get a hit on him. But if you jump too soon before he lands, he's not actually going to do that punch.
Okay. If you're trying I didn't utilize the punch at all. I mean, it certainly makes sense that that's a thing that occupies him, and then you can get behind him. But if an easier way, surely, at least for me, was just timing those jumps in the air, and you have to kind of delay your sword swing if you do it that way. So you're both kind of on opposite ends of the room, and you're jumping towards one another, and he's not going to attack at all. You're essentially in good shape. Because he's just going to he's making his jump and he's landing and that's it.
And you don't collide with just his hitbox, his sprite.
No, yeah,
which is good. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, you're in good shape. So, once you figure that out, it's fun. But something about a human operating or something, a flesh creature operating a little mech and having the robot punching arm and all that stuff was just charming to me. So,
with the Count's minion defeated, Ricky confronts him just in time to see the Luna system initiated with Merle as the target. Luckily, Rosina shows up and shuts the machine down and begs her father to stop. when we get a twist reveal and learn that the Luna system was the only thing keeping Rosina alive. The Count reveals that his daughter died long ago and that Rosina is a simulacrum that was animated by the crystal. While Ricky turns to confirm this with Rosina, the Count flees deeper into the laboratory. I just want to say I was really relieved at this point because on my first playthrough, I thought for sure that Merle was going to be turned into this big, mindless, raging beast, and that her own brother was going to have to put her down. I was terrified that this is what was going to happen, and I was very relieved that it wasn't the case.
Can I tell you two things here?
Sure.
I had never considered that, and now I'm extremely sad that didn't actually happen in the game. So our listeners at home now can tell the difference in our personal
like
characters between Brian and I.
Go watch Inhumanoids and see what Decompose does to one of the team members.
Right. Yeah. No. She gets dragged off with the Count, and it's essentially more of the same at this point. You're making your way further through the laboratory. And there's more spike traps and even more machine gun minions. And
the real enemy is the platforming.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, that's fitting with that whole level is that, it's more about the stage than it is about the enemies. Because you've already killed the enemies and it's just a single attack in most cases. And, it's not that big of a deal. But, yeah, this stage really throws everything at you at this point. In a final showdown with the Count, we learn that he no longer needs the Luna system, and that he'll take advantage of the full moon to transform himself into a powerful being. Okay, so here it is. It's the big finale. We thought we had reached the Count early on in the game, only to find a fake Count, and now it's payback time. So we have, I don't know, who wants to describe the abomination that you come into when you finally pin the Count down?
I don't know. It's really interesting. I really like his design, a lot. Yeah,
it's great.
It's that anime trope of having this big, overgrowing, cancerous, biomass of, writhing biomass. But
unlike like a Contra or something where it's like Alien or whatever, it has this kind of, I don't know if it's just in my head because of the moon thing, but kind of like a werewolf feel to it. It kind of has hair on it on its head, kind of.
Yeah, I could see that.
It's kind of like a monkey's paw wish for him. He wished for all this power, and now he turned into this complete freak of nature.
Yeah, I love the design, and you mentioned Contra, and it's hard. It's hard with an 8-bit game not to. Anytime you see a tumor embedded into the corner of a wall, not to go, oh yeah, that's Contra boss. But yeah, the color palette is all this sort of pallid blue with a sort of dark blue and black outline. Which once again, this game knows contrast, man. The colors of the sort of dark blues mixed with Ricky's bright tennis ball yellow getup is it's right on point. And if I'm not mistaken, and gosh, I'll have to profusely apologize if this is the case, but do you not see the moon?
Oh yeah,
it's in the background.
Okay, in the back.
Perfect.
Yeah,
all right,
definitely.
I knew I had thought of that, and I just wasn't sure if my brain was going.
That would have been a big missed
so
opportunity.
Really would have, and I'm glad. Okay, so you have this massive image of the moon, beaming overhead. Obviously, the cause of whatever enabled the Count to do this. They don't really go into much detail. I mean, the nerd in me would have really liked some sort of just a single panel in a cutscene of him shoving the moon crystal into his chest, or swallowing it. I don't know, doing something that would have explained why he was capable of doing this, but. I guess it leaves it up to your imagination in that regard. So once again, you've got kind of two stages to this boss fight, if memory serving. It's not quite as drastic as the blue armor and the dwarf mech. But still pretty cool. He got a couple of attacks. Who wants to sort of lay out how he attempts to stop?
Well, actually, you mentioned this earlier. The reason I wanted to bring this up is because this is kind of like the rock throwing machine or whatever that you described. It kind of sets you up for how his projectiles operate. Because what he does is he stands on one end, he kind of barfs out tumors, for lack of better description, and just like the rock throwing machine, if you get right below him, they'll just go straight down.
Right.
And then his secondary attack is he uses his left arm, and he throws like a wave, like a classic, like half moon or crescent moon like wave at you. So you can't just dodge. You have to dodge both. You have to kind of jump over the balls while also watching out for that. It's a regular intervals of him throwing that wave.
I can't even imagine how this boss would be without the double jump, though. I think it would be impossible.
Oh yeah, you'd probably be in rough shape. Before we go any further, I just want to point out that you've referred to it as a crescent, rightly so. But boy, I wonder how intentional that was. Like if there's some sort of connection with a crescent moon, in that attack, because I hope so.
I don't know. I think it's just a force.
Well, it's a very classic video game attack,
for sure. So the tumors, if I'm not mistaken, don't come out until after you beat the first phase, right?
No, he shoots. I mean, they're different.
He shoots whatever.
It's like fireballs.
Yeah. Well, no, he's got those. Yeah, they're like blue fireballs or blue energy burst at first, and those shoot like, there's kind of a weird random pattern to them unless you're in specific spots. But
the second form is the one that is like
cancer
cells that are like coming out of his mouth.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, was that like those
they're bigger and like more explicitly kind of
slow.
Yeah.
And you'll have to clarify if it's not in both phases, but that crescent wave, so it blasts out and it essentially burns the ground.
No.
Okay, so that's the second phase.
That's the second thing. Yeah.
Okay, so the crescent wave blasts out and just travels across the floor, and you're forced to duck under it. Or jump over it if possible, but you can. You're short enough and it travels high enough that you can, so long as you're ducking, you can avoid it. And then, so once the second phase comes up, those blue energy bursts are traded out for those tumor cells that he'll just continually vomit up, and then the fire blast, right, kind of comes out of.
It comes out of something,
and it travels.
It just goes back and forth.
Yeah, it comes out of something.
Yeah.
And it moves back and forth like in a cycle across the floor. Like every time he launches one out, it goes off screen, so from right to left, and then comes back in from left to right. And there's very seldom a good place to jump and not get hit by those cancer cells, and also avoid being hit with the fire. So you're moving around a lot in this second tier of this fight, and I don't know if that was cool. I liked it.
Well, that's the thing. Like with all my I finesse all these bosses. I brute force
really.
This one.
This is the one. This is the only one that I can finesse because he kind of telegraphs a little bit his moves.
Yeah, well, the first stage, but like the second stage, it's like just keep on hitting them.
Yeah, if you're smart about the first stage, and I found a really good way, and I don't know if you guys did this too. I found for my taste the close proximity downward attack of those blue bursts, like the straight line, was not always consistent. Sometimes it would just travel up and down, and if you got a good run, your movement pattern essentially consisted of you crouching, dodging the crescent, waiting for him to shoot the thing up and down, jumping up, hitting him in the face, repeat. But for me, it wasn't super consistent. So sometimes it would be 3 of the 4 blast would go straight up and down, and then one would come out and clip me in the head.
That depends on your positioning. It's if you don't get to a certain place in time, then one's going to stray.
It's pixel perfect. I mean, at least in my experience. So the best way to do it is to get. It's hard to describe. There's like a spot on the floor that is kind of illuminated in a specific way, and if you stand in that spot and essentially bait the projectile attack in the first phase, it will come at you at a diagonal. And as it comes at you in a diagonal, you can easily jump over it. So you jump over it, crouch, crescent comes out, you jump up, hit him in the face, immediately jump back to that spot. So 100% of the time he will shoot as long as you land in that region at a diagonal, and it makes it very easy to avoid. So, you can luck out, get the pixel perfect vertical, completely miss the blue energy burst, or do the back and forth like I just described, and it's pretty effective. So. And it's nice because if you want to tank him in second form, you're going to want to make sure that you have enough health to do so. I don't know. So any final thoughts on Count Crimson?
Yeah, no, I think he was a great boss. He was more varied than the other ones. Like I felt like most of the bosses were kind of one dimension, but this one was a little bit more different, and I like that. Yeah.
I love the design. Like Brian was saying, I think it looks so cool. Once again, I had trouble with this boss. I'll say, I don't know. I just couldn't get his pattern down, right away. So this ended up being the first boss that, in the second form, it's the first time I really learned on my own that if you had 1 health, you took off 3 hearts at once. Because when the first few times I played him, I would always have 1 heart by the time his second form came out, and then I would be like, oh, this second form's so easy. He takes 3 hearts go away at once. But then I realized it's because I was bad. So
yeah, you're on the verge of death.
Once the Count is defeated, we find the Luna system has gone haywire, and everyone has to get out of the laboratory. Ricky pleads with Rosina to come with them, but she reveals she cannot. With the Luna system down, she will soon cease to live, and therefore she wishes to remain to see to it that all of her father's work is destroyed. In a final moment, she thanks Ricky for his kindness and sends him and his family on their way.
All right, and with the Count destroyed, what year did Super Metroid come out? Can you guys think of anything else that does this? Maybe just because I've recently played it.
Metroid 1?
I couldn't
Escape.
help but... What's the end of Metroid 1 like that, where you needed to get back up? Yeah, okay.
First
well then,
Metroid.
so there is precedence for this that predates it for sure. But if you're listening to this going, all right, Brandon, get to the point. What are you talking about? The laboratory is destroyed, and it's starting to crumble down around Ricky, and he has to get out of there. So you're essentially backpedaling through the entire laboratory that you've already gone through, which is just awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I really like that. It took me several times to do it. I'll have to admit, a couple of times, I kept coming up short on time, and it doesn't pull any punches. If you get hung up in the dropping projectile, or not projectile, the sort of spiked ceiling and floor.
Because those are still working,
trap.
even though the lab's being destroyed. Those are still functional.
Yeah, I don't know. How did everyone else?
I thought it was really
this?
cool that you can bypass a lot of the platforming places because you go onto the top of it, kind of like a Mario 1 bypass. Yeah, you're on the top of the level. So I thought that was cool because you kind of just running through, so it kind of makes it feel like you're more more powerful, I suppose. It's kind of like in the Super Metroid with the beam thing. But I wish those spikes weren't there because they're kind of there's no reason for them to be there other than just being in the way.
Yeah, if you watch the speedruns, and something we kind of failed to mention was that, I mean, and you probably would have assumed to play this anyhow, but anytime you start a new section, like mostly a new stage, you start with full health. Yeah. It's only 3 bars, regardless of what you had before, but you're full health. And I've seen in some of the speedruns, people just tank those spikes. Because there's a couple of them, and if you can time it just right, there's a couple of fields of them where you can do that. But I don't know. Anyone have any closing thoughts on the laboratory as a stage? Anything we may have missed about the Count?
Well, I'll just say that I thought the escape was awesome, just because I ended with 3 seconds on the clock.
Oh yeah,
right on the wire.
When I beat it the second time on Sunday, I had 1 second.
That's awesome.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was satisfying, and I was like, all right, yeah, that's great.
I found the mood of the whole lobotomy laboratory to be as iconic as the first forest level, because the forest level was really cool. You get the waterfalls and stuff like that, but those two really stand out, I think, at least design wise.
Yeah, and smart once again, right, to kind of bookend this game with two sort of iconic stages like that. Yeah. Okay, so with Moon Crystal in the can, it's time for everyone's final thoughts. And I liked how we did this with our previous episode. So maybe each of you, let's do a little round robin, and you can give me something that you feel worked, something that was very successful in the game, and something that was not successful. Let's start with Frank.
Successful was gameplay all around. I thought it was a really good balance of Prince of Persia and more high-paced gaming kind of way. I just wish they would have added a third power-up to the sword to make it longer, so that you can keep running and gunning, not gunning, but running and sorting, and make the turn animation less frames, so you could turn on a dime kind of thing. That would make the game pretty much perfect. I mean, I think that's at least gameplay wise, I think that would be pretty good, because everything else, like, he runs fast enough. There's no startup on his run, more or less. Like, it's fun to play. Like, I didn't feel like I didn't want to play. Like, unlike Days Before Christmas, which was like tedious to play, but no, all around I thought it was great, and that would be the negative of it. So I think.
So let's get a rating then.
A 3.5. Homunculus tentacle monster out of 5.
All right, very good. Let's do Joseph next.
All right. I really enjoyed this game, and it's actually the first of the games that we've played where I think I'll probably keep revisiting it. You know, just nice. I feel like this is a good game to pop on. It's really short. Once you're familiar with it, you can play through it over and over again. And, you know, I think for my pros, I'm going to go, I think the level design is really the strong suit, other than the animation. I really like, especially now that we've talked about it more, I've been thinking more about the thoughtfulness put into just... It's like you know how a lot of games, especially 8-bit games, have the overworld map, you know, like Ghosts and Goblins and everything like that. This is like a game that doesn't need one, because you can see it as you play. You really get the layout of the world, and it makes sense, and it's the right length for the story it's trying to tell. As far as cons, I got to say that the thing that really brings this game down for me is just the bosses. I love their designs. I love I love the characters that they are, and everything. You know, even the woodsman who's just going about his job. I really
the thing that makes Ricky a murderer.
I really like them in general, but I don't like. I think they could put more thought into the encounters. Sure. I think I would have liked to see something more strategic rather than just kind of the get good nature of the finesse.
Yeah, I think it would have been amazing if they could have done a gimmick boss for every level, like you reflect the bullets, or you can only hit them in the back, or stuff like that. I think that would have been better.
Yeah,
I think it would have been cool if there was a boss that you could drop like a 10-ton anvil on and then have to hit him.
No thanks.
So let's get a rating.
I'm going to give it 3.5 moonlighting foot soldiers out of 5.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Yeah, this is what they're doing when Shredder gives them some
when
time
Shredder's
off,
dead for like 4 years at a time.
You got to make ends meet somehow. All right, Brian. Last but not least, this was your selection. So
you're actually the last, but you're before last but not least.
Well, yeah. Last but not least of the three of you. How about that?
Gotcha. I really have to hand it to my friends that who suggested it to me. Said, "Hey, man, I'm pretty sure you're gonna like this," and they were right. I really liked it. Combat was unique, bit unforgiving, but still quite manageable. Also, at my age, I can definitely appreciate a game that's not any longer than it needs to be, and this is definitely that. Counter to the rest of the team here, I very much enjoy the process of getting good, and there was a very clear path to do so for me, so I enjoyed that. And I guess on the downside, I don't know, some of the platforming kind of later on, I think it had some jank to it. I'm not even sure how there's one spike area that I'm not sure how you're even supposed to get past without
taking a hit. But
I don't, some things I kind of scratch my head at, but I just like the melee combat. I like a lot of it. So, no, let's say I loved it, so I'm going to give it a 5. In the name of the moon, I will punish yous out of 5.
Oh, hot damn!
Our first
That's
5 out
beautiful.
of 5.
All right. Well, so as for me, I'm going to reveal a little secret to the listeners here. So I've already decided on my rating, and I've already given a number to it. And through the course of this conversation that we've had tonight, I've learned some new things about the game. Being able to have this conversation has put certain things into perspective for me, and that number has gone up.
Plot twist.
Yeah, it actually, it increased.
Transformative experience.
Yeah, no, honestly, and it's funny, and I don't want to get too sappy here, but when Joseph and I recorded the preview episode of the show where we sort of talked about what my plans were for it, like this type of game and this type of experience that we're having communicating with each other is like literally the exact idea that I'd had in mind for it, which was to play something interesting that I'd never played before, which was to have thoughtful and informative conversation with you guys about it, and and to make a fun podcast. So it hits all the bells for those. So this game is not without its faults. It's got some pros and cons. The animation, it's great. And it certainly is like the most obvious thing that stands out. But I think my biggest pro for it would have to be the thoughtfulness put into the stage design and the story that it tells from front to back. I think that's the thing that it does the best. The thing that it does the worst, it's going to sound like a slight nitpick, but it's definitely just that some of those animations are so slow to respond. So you've compromised the speed of play with the need to make it look a certain way. There's give and take, but like I said, that's a slight nitpick. So overall, I'm going to give this game a 4 suicidal simulacrums out of 5. Whereas before it was just a 3.5.
I have to say that, credit to you, because there were probably about 3 or 4 times during this conversation where I thought, maybe a 4. I kept going, because talking about it really did make me appreciate it more and more. So yeah, I was really close. Just to let you know, you're not alone on that.
I think for me personally, I will only give something a 4 if I will have the desire to replay it. And I know Brian will definitely, he has been replaying it. So giving it a 5.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the way I do the 5-point system, 5 means I loved it, 4 means I really liked it, 3 means I liked it, 2 means I didn't like it, and 1 means I hated it. That's how I do it. I'm not going to hold you guys to that, but that's 5 out of 5 doesn't mean perfect.
But it's you like it.
It means I loved it.
You love it.
Brian likes it so much that his character is still standing on the porthole in the pirate ship.
Well, on that note, if you're listening to this and you want to play this game, I've got some good news and bad news. And, as I mentioned before, the game was never released officially outside of Japan. So if you have a Famicom and you want to get your hands on it, you've got a couple of options. The cheap option, there's a thing called a repro cart. In most instances, Doki Doki Game Club doesn't necessarily condone or speak out against the idea of repros. It's essentially a replica of the original cartridge. You can pick one up fairly cheap. In the case of this, it's about $20 to be found on eBay and various websites online. And, if you're a person that's into playing on original hardware, go for it. I mean, I think it would probably be a really awesome experience to have this, especially if you're not so hung up on not having the original cartridge. Because when I tell you the price of the original cartridge, I think you're going to go, oh, yeah, I think I'll get a repro. So hopefully your pockets are deep, because right now the going rate on a loose cartridge, that means just the plastic cartridge you're going to shove into your Famicom, is $700. Yeah, it's extreme. Now, on the off chance that you can find this weird, obscure little video game from Japan, complete in box, it's over $1,200. So this has to be one of the most expensive NES games, or in this case, a Famicom game, available. So only for the true believer and not for the faint of heart.
I have a bit of an anecdote about this, because after I played it for the cast, I was like, I want to buy this game. I want to own it because I'm a maniac, So I went on eBay, and for one thing, I am happy to say that you can actually. I was able to find some complete in box copies for a buy it now price of roughly like $800, which I would still, of course, never ever in a billion years do.
Time to eat too.
But I think with this, I was kind of disappointed. I was like, why must we play these rare games?
That's good. So normally this isn't a thing that Doki Doki Game Club necessarily condones, as kind of with the repro thing, but since this game was not released outside of Japan, I think this is a safe thing to do. And that's to say to emulate this game. And being that it's a game with a lot of cutscenes in it that explain the story, it's definitely a thing you're going to want to get the English patched version of. And so since about 2000, some noble soul took the time to go through and translate all the text and recode it in there. And it looks great, and you wouldn't know that this wasn't released in America. So however you need to, get your hands on it. And now it's time for Doki Doki Powerline. That's right, it's Doki Doki Powerline, where we plug you into the source for the hottest gamer tips and tricks. The winner of this episode's Powerline Pro Tip comes from Akemi Toriyama, presumably all the way from Japan.
Wow.
Joseph, would you like to read what Akemi has sent to us?
Absolutely. Let me translate it real quick into English. It says...
Oh, yeah. You're quite fluent in Japanese.
I can do it on the fly. It's no big deal. Press and hold up on the second controller and press reset. If done right, the level select menu will appear.
Hey now. Thank you very much, Akemi Toriyama.
Thank you.
So, with Moon Crystal complete, we've now wrapped up our first rotation, where we've played a game from each of our individual lists. Normally this would mean we'd restart the order, but before we do that, we're going to have our very first Patreon guest host on. As I mentioned in episode 2, our guest will be Super Battle Genius, aka Joe Shea, and he has selected Pocky and Rocky 2 for the Super Nintendo. So start playing that now, and we'll be back with that episode early on in the new year. And that concludes episode 4 of Doki Doki Game Club. Before we shut down the Luna system and detonate the laboratory, I want to thank the reanimated corpses of my co-hosts for joining me today. Who are you guys, and where can people find you?
I'm Frank Martin. You can find me on Twitter at Hios_IO and on Twitch, twitch.tv/Hios_, where I sometimes stream the games that we talk about here. I stream Days, and I did stream a little bit of this game as well.
And I am Brian Grogan. You can find me on Twitter at KenOShinobi. You can also find me shitposting at shitpostnsf on Facebook.
And I am Joseph Luster, and you can find me on Twitter at Moldilux, MOLDILOX. I have a website at subhumanzoids.com, which has all of my comics like the smash hit Big Dumb Fighting Idiots, which is just about to return with new pages. My other podcast is Subhuman Cast, which just went up with episode 2 recently, so it's still on the ground floor. Get on it. And you can find my daily writing at Crunchyroll and Otaku USA magazine.
And if Twitter is your thing and you'd like to follow me personally, I am Genocide over there. That's spelled DJINNOCIDE. And you can follow the show on Twitter at Doki Doki GC. In addition to that, we're practically on every other social network online as well, so search for Doki Doki Game Club all across the World Wide Web, or head over to dokidokigameclub.com for further details. Thank you once again to everyone who continues to tweet about us using hashtag DokiDokiGC, or shares a link to the show on Facebook. We're just getting warmed up here, and your support is the moon crystal and that powers our Luna system. And last but not least, we have a Patreon. So if you have a couple of bucks you can spare and would like to show us your support in that manner, you can head on over to patreon.com/Doki Doki Game Club, where we have some pretty neat rewards available to anyone interested in supporting us in that fashion. So on behalf of Brian, Frank, Joseph, and myself, thanks for listening. And until next time, adios, Battletoads.